Dr. Kamran Bukhari is joining us today to discuss this. He's a senior director at New Lines Institute for Strategy and Policy in Washington, D.C., and he's also a senior resident fellow at the Middle East Policy Council in Washington, a very well-known analyst and commentator on global affairs. Dr. Kamran Bukhari, welcome.
Thank you, Fahad. Appreciate you having me.
So, President's speech, it was billed as something which may give us a clear indication of what he's thinking, whether he wants to bring the war to an end or whether he has other options open. And a lot of people think that he failed to commit on anything and that the situation remains as confused or unclear after the speech as it was before the speech. How do you look at what he said?
So there are a couple of different imperatives that the president or any leader in such a has to balance out. First is keeping the public informed about what's going on. So, especially in democracies, that's a big thing. You need to have the public with you, especially if your poll numbers are low, if the war is not very popular, and then the economic fallout is increasing, and you have a midterm election year. So he needed to come out and tell the public that where do we stand, what is he trying to do? But at the same time, he can't be too specific because this is a war. You keep your cards close to your chest as much as possible. You can't give a whole lot of detail as to what will unfold, what are you planning to do. But there are bits and pieces of information that one could glean some insights from. I particularly was very interested in his comments about the Strait of Hormuz, because I think that's sort of where everything hinges right now. That's sort of creating the pressure point for the president, and of course, the way forward.
Which particular aspect of this Strait of Hormuz reference did you think was the most important? Because we are seeing two different interpretations, and also, if you see what the administration officials are saying repeatedly, at least to me, Dr. Bokhari, there are two contradictory messages coming out. One, that the Strait of Hormuz will be opened. Until that happens, this war does not come to an end. And the other, of course, is many people, including the president, saying that, that's not a problem. If the Europeans want their oil, they need to go there and get the straits open themselves. So, any clarity, in your opinion, in terms of what the president means when it talks about the Straits of Hormuz?
So there are different threads to this whole thing. The first thing is that he is basically telegraphing that this isn't a pressure point for him necessarily. So what does he mean by that? What he means by that is he says, look, we have a mission. It's 2 to 3 weeks more in the making. We have 2 to 3 more weeks to go, during which time, if we can arrive at a negotiated settlement, then the problem is solved, and the problem will be solved by accepting the demands. The Iranians, in addition to accepting zero enrichment, caps on ballistic missile capabilities, and no support for armed proxies in the region, you will need to be able to desist from the Straits of Hormuz actions in the future, because otherwise you can't have an agreement. So that's one particular outcome that could happen if the other side meets the demands. Now, side does not meet the demands, then there is no formal settlement. Then what we have is a unilateral end to this conflict, in which case the firing of rockets and missiles and drones across the Persian Gulf that have disrupted traffic through the Straits of Hormuz will end by itself. I think the president made that very clear. It will end by itself, and we'll keep Overwatch. And if in the future the Iranians want to disrupt it again, then we'll keep Overwatch. We'll go to a sort of the mowing the lawn strategy, if you will. But he remains, hopeful that because of the imperatives and the constraints on the Iranians, they need this deal.
Hmm.
The United States can always walk away, but the Iranians cannot afford to not have a deal and have sort of like a unilateral end to hostilities for now, only for them to reoccur again.
But a lot depends, Dr. Bukhari, on how you look at the present situation. So, for example, if your assessment is that Iran holds all the cards, that it has, it's in a stronger position, it has more leverage in terms of its chokehold on the Strait of Hormuz, and if that is the basis of our assessment, then clearly Iran will not be interested in accepting any demands from the US. But if you're somebody who thinks that no, actually the United States and Israel hold the cards, then the other option kicks into motion. So which side of the divide are you on?
So I'm not into binaries. Obviously, these are things, everything is relative here. But I look at net strategic terms. Okay. If you look at the battle space in net strategic terms, the Iranians have far more to lose. Mind you, that they don't control the Straits of Hormuz, as in like they have a naval blockade or anything of that. What they have done is disrupted the Strait of Hormuz because of the drone and missile firing across the Gulf. So why is that happening? That is happening because they were attacked. This is their only play. And therefore, this isn't something that is sustainable. So the idea that they have control or the cards is terribly misleading. What is their imperative? What is the thing that they must have when everything is said and done? First, they need to bring this war to an end. The more this war goes on, the weaker the regime begins. The red line of the regime is, look, we can only go so far in terms of resisting attacks from the outside. What they cannot tolerate is degradation to the point that the regime begins to struggle to maintain control at home. That is their red line. They need that. And then they don't want to go back to February 27th, which is, they were sanctioned. And now if this happens, if there is no deal, and they know this well, if there is no deal, then they will go back to not just the previous sanctions, but further sanctions. It will be like 1991 Iraq at the end of that war when Saddam was sanctioned, and it was a slow burn from there onwards. That's something they're trying to avoid. So I just don't see how the Iranians hold the cards, because what's more important to them? Of Hormuz, it's a tactic. It's not more than a tactic to try and get the other side to agree to your terms on the table, which is a challenge in itself.
But then, Dr. Bukhari, let me present to you the other point of view. You're saying that they can't hold on. They have to. They want an end to the war. And the other point of view is that, well, actually, if we are into a war of attrition, then the Americans would probably want the war to end earlier. Their reasons for bringing this conflict to an end are far more pressing than Iran's. And if that is the case, then obviously they are in no position to command the kind of demands that they are looking into, and they will then need to, in many ways, give concessions to Iran. So, bottom line, who has more stamina, Iran or the US?
So again, I steer away from sort of these absolute sort of who has more, who has less. It's relative. Okay, the pain pressure for the United States is the political economic. Okay, so it's a very different kind of pressure, and you're absolutely right. The United States does not have months. The president does not have months. He has weeks before he needs to bring this to a closure, because there are constraints on him. But those constraints are very different. They're not existential. The Iranians are hoping, so the Iranians have two goals. One is to resist and to hold out. That is their objective. But can they meet that objective? They cannot assume what the other side will do, that they will be able to hold out. That is their goal, but they have to assume that it's a difficult goal to achieve, because of the uncertainty of what the United States and the Israelis do. By now, since last June, they know that the other side throws curveballs and surprise. So they know that very well. So even if they hold out, they don't want to have this war ended in a way that they are left battered, and it's a slow spiral downwards from there onward. That's why I brought up the 1991 Iraq and Saddam Hussein analogy. They are very well aware of that, and they don't want to go down that path. So to say that this side, has more is under more pressure or that, I think that's too simplistic. I think we have to look at the pressures on their own merit, and they're very different kinds of pressures that the two sides are under.
So now that finally, Dr. Kamran Bukhari, as you also mentioned that the president said that he would like to wrap up this conflict in a couple of weeks, 2 to 3 weeks. Of course, the timelines are his, and he can change them anytime. But if we are looking at, let's say, the kind of timeline that the president has actually mentioned, and of course there's reference to his visit to China also, and the fact that he wants this wrapped up before he gets there. So what can actually happen in a couple of weeks? Because it's very difficult to imagine that in the next 2 to 3 weeks, the Iranians are going to say, okay, we are ready and willing to give up our uranium and our missiles and everything else. So either, as you said, the president declares victory, walks off, tells everybody, now it's your mess, you deal with it. Or he decides, no, I'm going to escalate to de-escalate. And that's where things get really dangerous. So what seems to be, which option, in your opinion, seems more probable?
So I think it's a blend of both. I mean, I think as he said last night, we're going to see escalation from this point onward. And the escalation will take place over the next 2 to 3 weeks. It's not going to wait till after the 2 to 3 week time period. So he wants everything said and done within 2 to 3 weeks. He wants to be able to stick to that timetable. We'll have to see that. But I think that when he says that there's going to be an escalation to de-escalate, I think he's talking about right now. I think that's why, I was walking into this interview, and, I had a lot of reports come on my phone saying that there has been severe bombing in Tehran and Karaj, which is the town north of Tehran, today, just in the last few hours. So there is already an escalation to de-escalate. So what can happen? There are two pathways. One, and mind you, look, one of the things that a lot of people focus too much on, in my opinion, are the public statements from all sides. This is why, I didn't want to go bit by bit into the president's speech last night. I only focused on the things that I thought were more significant. Likewise, what the Iranians are saying has to be taken with a grain of salt, because here's the problem. Do we expect them to say that, yes, we're going to come to the table? No, they're going to, of course, say we are not coming to the table. What is happening behind the scenes is a different story altogether. And that's the part that's missing here. I think, look, the conversations will continue, the battle space will remain hot, and these two tracks will be parallel. At some point, they converge, okay, and we have a settlement. And the settlement, as I said, has to be on those four things. The three initial ones, and the fourth is the Strait of Hormuz. If it does not happen, the U.S. can say, enough for now, we're done for here, but we're going to have Overwatch moving forward, and we're going to continue to monitor the situation closely, and we're going to use kinetic force as and when needed. I think that's the other pathway. My own assessment is that latter pathway is far more dangerous, open-ended for the Iranians, and therefore they will do everything to try and reach an agreement. The problem I see on the Iranian side is not that they don't want to compromise. You compromise based on battlefield realities, not subjective preferences. But what's coming in between them is, now more than ever before, this regime is internally divided. It has always been. There were multiple power centers, multiple institutions, factions, and now with the decapitation and new people, emerging onto the scene at multiple levels, 2-3 levels of leadership, consensus building becomes really, really hard. So I think that those are the things we need to watch for moving forward.
So, which essentially means, my final question, Dr. Kamran Bukhari, that if it is actually a blend of the options that I was talking about, and those options remain open. Then the initiative that country like Pakistan have taken, the diplomatic route, with China also being brought in, and a lot of activities happening, as you very correctly pointed out, behind closed doors. Even here, Dr. Bukhari, in Islamabad, you know, it's very difficult to say what the Pakistani initiative is in terms of details. They're keeping it under wraps, and understandably so. So that option remains open, and it can be operationalized anytime there is a chance. So in other words, what I'm trying to ask you is, Pakistan's initiative can still bear fruit.
Oh, absolutely. I do believe that. I think that right now, Pakistan is in probably the most strongest position to mediate. Because look, in order to be the third party, the mediator, you have to have influence on both sides. So U.S. Pakistani relations are in an upswing, and they're getting better and better. So that's condition is satisfied. The other condition is that does Pakistan have influence over Iran? And I think yes. And the way I would describe it is that of, Iran is strategically lonely in its strategic environment. It has no friends. Okay, there's Russia, and they can't do much for them. There's China, and they have their own issues, and they don't want to get involved in this. Only as part of a diplomatic process. Now that leaves Pakistan, which has the least problematic relationship with Iran if you look at all the neighbors of Iran. So that gives Pakistan a great deal of leverage. I think the interest here is to actually demonstrate performance. That look, you asked us to do something, and here's what we've done, and that in turn will set Pakistan in a sort of a relationship or a level of a relationship with the United States that could benefit, that will definitely benefit Pakistan down the road, in the days and weeks and months to come. I think that's the Pakistani interest here, is to make sure that they try their utmost to have a negotiated settlement. I think they're burning the midnight oil on that, but will they be successful? It's largely in the hands of the Iranians, as I said earlier. Are they all on the same page, or their internal differences and their leadership is in such a situation where they cannot arrive at that consensus and then come to the table and tell the Pakistanis, we're ready?
Dr. Kamran Bukhari, always a pleasure. Thank you for sharing your analysis with us.